picked Lori Chavez-DeRemer, and she was ultimately confirmed. She was kind of I would say a lot of conservatives were kind of raised their eyebrows at the pick because she was one of, I think, she used to be a congresswoman before this, one of 2 congressional Republicans who voted for the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by economics reporter Zach Halaschak. Yep. Zach, the Trump tariffs have provoked a pretty fierce reaction from the stock markets.
Wall Street is not happy, to say the least. You know, I think going into this, Trump talked a lot about tariffs on the campaign trail, and so none of this is really coming as a surprise to people who watched him, but I think a lot of Wall Street kind of expected him to be tempered by his advisors, that maybe these tariffs were merely threats and that he would back off. Kind of like, if you remember during his first term, he, a few times with Mexico and with other countries, he would menace tariffs, and then, you know, they would have some sort of agreement, and then 24 hours later he'd say, oh, well, we agreed to this, and it would tout it like it was a huge change, but a lot of times it wasn't that big of a change. But so they kind of thought he might go in with that same sort of mindset, like, you know, obviously if on the campaign trail you can't just tell reporters, oh, this is a gimmick, you know, we're just doing this for leverage. So they kind of went in with that expectation, but the past week or so we've kind of seen that, 2 weeks now, that's not really the case. He's allowed some major tariffs to go in on Mexico, Canada. Obviously, they've changed things, peeled things back. You know, then Canada, it would be hard to kind of go line by line because every day it changes essentially. But basically, there's an ongoing trade war of sorts with the U.S. and other countries and allies like Mexico and Canada, and that's really scaring markets. It's investors don't like that. Investors like certainty. They like to know the amount of tariffs on an item that, you know, a week from now might be something totally different. So that kind of uncertainty is driving down the overall stock market. We've seen several days stocks declining in the triple digits. You know, pretty much erased all the gains. If you remember, right after Trump was elected, the stock market rose pretty high, you know, for quite a bit after he was elected. All those gains are erased, and we're, I think, about flat year to date as of today. But again, it's day by day, and we'll see if it'll continue that trajectory. I think that if you start seeing more certainty, some of the countries coming to agreements and kind of backing off, the stock market is going to react positively and kind of do the knee-jerk reaction back up again. But again, if we keep getting further into this trade war, the stocks only are going to fall.
You mentioned the word uncertainty, and so the Wall Street generally doesn't like the fact of the tariffs, but also the fact that they keep changing so quickly and are not stable is also a major source of frustration.
Yeah, and I think that's it. If they knew that Trump was going to say 25% tariffs, we're going to keep them until XYZ happens, well, when XYZ happens, presumably those would be removed, and presumably those would stay not changed until that happens. So that would be certainty. And yeah, Wall Street's not going to like tariffs. I mean, tariffs aren't good for the economy in terms of, you know, inflation. Most economists say that's basically a tax on consumers. So, you know, tariffs aren't good to Wall Street in that way, but at least there's some sort of certainty. They know what to expect, how to, you know, so they know how to trade and they can make their own money in the stock market. When it's this kind of chaotic, you know, cacophony of just like changing every day, it's really, I think, almost the bigger factor in driving down stocks.
Now, there has been some good news in the economy. What's that?
So inflation, which has been the biggest issue, biggest concern for voters during the past election cycle, part of what got Trump elected, was his promise to lower prices. Finally, after several months of ticking up, ticked back down. So moving in the in the right direction again. So that was for the month of February. It dropped from, I think, 3% to now it's at 2.8% on the consumer price index. So, you know, inflation's coming down. The Fed wants to see 2%. So we're still, you know, 0.8 of a percentage point away from that target. And again, this is for the month of February. So, you know, again, when we talk about tariffs being inflationary, a lot of those tariffs haven't really gone into effect yet as of last month. So it'll be interesting to see March, April, you know, depending on how the tariffs are shaking out, where that'll go. The Fed has to make an interest rate decision next week. It's probably going to hold off on cutting or doing anything to interest rates again. I think the Fed is very much in kind of this holding pattern, this wait and see, to kind of see what's happening with the administration, see what's happening with the economy, see what's happening with just all these macroeconomic factors before it decides what to do next. But yeah, there's again a lot of uncertainty, and that makes the Fed's job difficult and what to do with interest rates too.
One thing where we've achieved a little bit of certainty is we know now who President Trump's Secretary of Labor is going to be.
Yeah, he picked Lori Chavez-DeRemer, and she was ultimately confirmed. She was kind of I would say a lot of conservatives were kind of raised their eyebrows at the pick because she was one of, I think, two she used to be a congresswoman before this, one of two congressional Republicans who voted for the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act, as you'll hear it called quite frequently. And that was a super pro-union piece of legislation that Democrats really spearheaded and really tried to pass under former President Joe Biden. Never got passed because of, even some Democrats that are more moderate didn't want to support it. But she did support it, and I think that's why you have Mike Pence came out against the nomination. I actually wrote up a story. His organization opposed her nomination because they didn't think she was sufficiently conservative, or they thought she was maybe too chummy with the unions. Teamsters President Sean O'Brien, he came out and endorsed her nomination. And so a lot of Democrats, too, when she had the vote, voted for her nomination. You had 3 Republican senators who bucked Trump and voted against her nomination because of those reasons. The PRO Act itself would essentially end right-to-work states, which has always been a long tenet of the Republican Party, allowing right-to-work states.
And a lot of red states are right-to-work states.
Exactly. And I will say during her confirmation hearing, she was asked by Rand Paul about that, and she did disavow that part. She said she no longer supports the idea of ending right-to-work states. So I think that might have given some cover for Republicans who would have voted against her, senators that would have voted against her nomination, to vote for her. But again, in the end, 3 senators just said no, and we're going to vote against her because they didn't think she was sufficiently conservative when it comes to organized labor and unions and that sort of thing.
And it still ended up, though, being probably the most bipartisan vote since Marco Rubio was confirmed.
Yeah, I believe it was, yeah. And that owes to the fact that she has the Democrats coming to support her, because I think that if you're a Democrat and you're looking at this, obviously she's not the ideal person for labor secretary. They could think of a lot more pro-labor people, but from a Republican, this is about the best pick they could expect. And so I think that was a recognition of that fact. You saw so many Democrats go over and vote across the aisle.
Strange unions. Thank you, Zach.
Strange unions, yep.
You can read Zach and the rest of our policy team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.